see much better on this.
I would like to call the scheduled meeting for the Committee of the Whole. Today is Monday, July 13th, 2009. And if we can all stand at this time and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic that stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. And to make this meeting official, I would ask that we ask Petty Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Pezza.
Here.
Shea.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Rose. Absent. Graham.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Nybo.
Here.
Healy. Absent. Morley.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner. Here. Wagner.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent, nobody, 12 to 2, basically. We have a quorum, and I'm going to change up the agenda for tonight so that we could have item number 2. We'll go to item 3 so that we can address the City Center issue and not have them delayed for the orientation from our attorney tonight. So at this point, I would go to City Center SSA 6 and 7. And the Board of Directors of the election process of City Center, and I would invite the Executive Director, Tom Paravola, to come up to the podium, please. Thanks, Tom.
Good evening. I'm Tom Paravola, Executive Director of City Center. I think I know most everybody. Mr. Borchert requested that I come in tonight to report on City Center's 2009. Can't hear me? Mr. Borchert requested that I come in and report on City Center's 2009 Board of Directors election process, specifically as to concerns raised at the last City Council meeting. Before getting to the substantive issue, I'd like to make a couple comments on procedural type things. One as to accountability, and that is as to there has been dialogue for some time over the issues raised between myself and several of the aldermen and representatives from Citizens Advocacy Group. And over time, I have reported on that dialogue to the City Center Board of Directors, advised the board generally as to what the issues were in the conversation and how I intended to address the matter. And the board directed me to proceed along the lines I had outlined. With the assistance of staff from the office, the City Center election materials have already gone out. Those materials are structured and drafted by me. So coming back to the accountability side, full accountability, responsibility for execution of the election process is solely with me. As to communication, while we were proceeding, or while I proceeded on the basis that I was addressing the matter as I advised all parties that I would be the first to admit that certainly I could have more strongly, perhaps more diligently communicated the process as it went along. So on the communication point, I just wanted to make that clear. Turning to substance, the materials I distributed, if you reference the packet, my understanding is that it's really a single issue that we're addressing, which is City Center's promulgation of list of its merchant members and commercial property owner members for reference by members in each class of the membership for purposes of the election process, particularly the submission of nominating petitions for positions on the Board of Directors. The copies of the materials you have, I'll just briefly walk through them. The first page is a schedule of our election process. You can see at the June 23rd City Center meeting, the board met, appointed a nominating committee. For this year, that nominating committee will be Natalie Zisco, Ed Conway, and Marlene Tegmeyer. Subsequent to that, on July 7th, the board election packets went out, mailings to both merchant members and commercial property owner members. And then you can see how the process unfolds. There's a 30-day nominating period running to August 6th. And then at that point, the nominating committee can take action to make additional nominations. Ballots are mailed to the membership on August 21st, and the due date for ballots is September 1st. All of these dates are backed out from requirements in the bylaws for how the election process is to be conducted. If you go to page 2, I just included a listing of our board of directors. And you can see the 5 commercial property owner directors. The 1 director who is up for election currently is Willis Johnson. You can see the 5 merchant member directors. There are 2 directors up for election, Kevin O'Keefe and Christy Sopko. If you flip over to the next page, the next 3 pages are copies of the materials that were sent to all merchant members. We currently list 307 merchant members in the city center area. You can see the reference to the directors in the staggered terms, who is up for election, and then how the positions will be reflected on the ballot, which can be by nomination by merchant members or by nomination directly by the nominating committee. Merchants are advised that they can submit petitions all the way up through August 6th, and you can see the setting forth in the second paragraph, designated representatives of 16 merchant members have to sign a nominating petition. Then if you look at the box in the middle of the page now, and this is a redesigned form from prior years, it specifically stated the nominating petition will be valid only if signed by the properly appointed designated representatives of 16 merchant members. And then there's just discussion there in terms of reflecting merchant members have typically appointed their owners or one of their owners or their store or business managers as their designated representatives. Then there's reference to the city center office maintaining a listing of all merchant member designated representatives. And then here this goes directly to the concern that's been raised, a copy of which may be obtained by any merchant member circulating a nominating petition for the Board of Directors election for reference to ensure the nominating petition is signed by the proper designated representatives. Carrying it further is referenced here. Further, a merchant member submitting a nominating petition may consult with the city center office prior to the deadline for submitting nominating petitions to confirm the validity of designated representative signatures obtained on the petition. And then the form goes on to say that there is a designation of representative form included with the packet. Flip the page, you can see the form of nominating petition, which reflects that it's to be signed by the designated representative of the merchant member, both in terms of the headings of the columns and also at the bottom of the page. Then the third piece of paper as regards the merchant member is the designation of representative form, which is in the packet. And what I'd call your attention to is on the bottom of the page, there are 5 notes in terms of the requirement that city center members appoint a representative, where notices are going to go, which is to the designated representative, and then referencing that this form is to be used and that it will continue to apply until changed. And any questions, people can contact the city center office. Flipping the page, the next 3 pages address commercial property owner member situation. All of the verbiage is the same with the exception of the reference to the 2 board positions on the property owner side that are up for election and is reflected on the nominating petition. Only 8 signatures are required by commercial property owner members to run for election. Beyond the materials, the only other thing I would note is that to the extent that any city center member, merchant member, or commercial property owner member contacts the office or me with questions concerning the election process, or to the extent I am given any merchant member or commercial property owner member's name by aldermen, other city officials, city center board members who receive contacts, any other party, I will personally contact that city center member to be sure that he or she understands the election process and to ensure that they have copies of all relevant materials. I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pervola. So basically, to get on the ballot, if you're an owner, you need 8 signatures. If you're a merchant, you need 16, it sounds like, based on what we see here. So relatively nominal number. Does any, I know we had some aldermen that had questions on the process. Any discussion that you'd like to direct toward Mr. Pervola?
First of all, thank you so much. I know you were very cooperative when I spoke with you, and you promised you'd get it done in 2 weeks, and it looks like that's what happened, so thank you. Just a couple of questions as a follow-up. From what I understand, I mean, do you actually have all 300 and some now on a list of who's who and what's what?
We have a list of 307 merchant members. With respect to some small number of those, we do not have a designated representative, but I would say for 95% we do.
Okay, and what about the actual property owners? Did you have success with that also?
Property owners, we have followed the process we have done in prior years. We obtain a listing of parcels and parcel numbers from the DuPage County Clerk's office, and we prepare a list off that with reference to prior year's forms submitted. We have a listing of, again, there's some property owners own multiple parcels. There are 90 different commercial property owners.
Okay, and so we actually have actual names of people?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. If there are people who have not submitted or you're still unsure of, I think some of the questions I was asked related to, would that mean if, you know, someone wanted to run and then they came and turned in a petition but they didn't have anything on file, would that exclude them from being the ability to run since you don't have their information on file?
No, if I understand your question, if a commercial property owner comes in and is a legitimate commercial property owner and he or she wants to run, if they have a nominating petition with 8 signatures, they will be entitled to run, whether or not we've received any official form from them.
So if their name isn't on file as the official owner of the property or designated business rep, they still qualify to run for an office or to sign?
I guess I'm not understanding your question. I'm thinking that if we have an error or we're not correctly
No,
showing
I know
the
you said there were a few that didn't want their names disclosed. So would those people then be eligible to either run for a position or sign a petition if they didn't choose to disclose their information?
I guess I'm not tracking on the question. If you are a building owner and the DuPage County Clerk has sent us the information that you are in fact a building owner, and you come into the office with a petition, you will be able to run regardless of whether you have given us a designated representative form to that point. If you are listed by the DuPage County Clerk as a commercial property owner within City Center, you will be entitled to run.
Okay, is that in accordance with the bylaws? Because I have not read the bylaws.
Yes.
So they don't have to officially tell you, you can obtain it elsewhere?
Right. Yes.
And is there okay, I think that's one of the issues still outstanding where people are confused, is if we're saying we don't have every property owner's exact name and they don't want it disclosed, can that person in exchange run for a seat or sign a petition? That's the question I've been asked, and I didn't know the answer.
I guess I'm not tracking on the question.
I've been told, I think by you and a few others, that there are certain property owners who do not want their information disclosed.
Yes.
Can those people qualify to run or sign a petition if they're not willing to disclose their information?
Well, I think they would have to disclose who they were so that they could either run or sign a petition.
That's the question. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise I wouldn't know they were running.
Exactly. Exactly the point. Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions, Diane? Alderman Gutenkopf?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm the one who pulled the appropriation to give us a little time to get these questions answered. So I very much appreciate that you've come in tonight to share with us the entire election process. As you know, we started discussing this process and how it worked last February. And in February, I know you said it was going to take you quite a while to put those lists together. So I'm quite gratified to hear that you've been able to finally pull those lists together. So if I were to come into the City Center office, you could hand me a list of the designated representatives of the merchant members so that if I were a merchant owner, I could run for office. Did you bring those lists with you tonight?
I have copies of the list that I can leave with the city manager.
I would appreciate that and seeing that. And really, that was the big sticking point that I knew it was going to take you a while and that I hadn't heard from you, and we tried to contact you, and I know others had. So I'm really glad that this process is able to follow the bylaws, and so I very much appreciate that you were able to do that. Thank you.
And again, I would emphasize, if a merchant member or commercial property owner member contacts anyone, if I'm forwarded their name and number, I will contact them and address matters. And if for whatever reason they don't want to speak with me, they can speak with Jeff Budgell, our board chair, or any other member on the City Center board to have concerns addressed. So it's a wide open, door to contact us and have any questions or concerns directly addressed by us.
Very good. Alderman Pezza?
Thank you. Just to follow up, is this also going to be, if any of the merchants or owners have a question or comment this evening, where they can also speak, or I was asked that and I wasn't sure?
I would defer to the city attorney on that. Don, what do you think?
Paula, could you repeat that one more time?
When I arrived, a couple of merchants asked if they would also have a forum in which to speak this evening.
I think that would be up to the council. It is a committee meeting, committee of the whole meeting, and you have these rules, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, to talk about who can talk at a council meeting and who can address each other. But clearly, you can waive those rules if you wish to, and by a majority vote, and let anybody address you, I would think.
Make a motion to suspend the rules.
Then I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules for this evening, if any merchants would like to speak.
Okay.
Second.
And we have a second. So we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules to open in the public forum. Do we have discussion on that? Okay. We can do this by voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak regarding this issue, we will give you 3 minutes. If you could just state your name and your address, your business name as well, feel free to raise your hand and you'll be heard. Anybody from City Center, merchants, or property owners that would like to speak at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we appreciate Mr. Paravola. Mr. Dulles, would you like to speak? Yes. You can go to the microphone to your left, and even though most of us know your name and your business, if you're going to state that for us, we'll be bringing our dry cleaner over tomorrow.
Hi, I'm John Dulles from Dulles Cleaners in Elmhurst, 51 years, second generation in the family business. I'm kind of baffled when I hear from my fellow business people in downtown Elmhurst why it took so long for these names in this list to be released. Why did they take the press to come down here from Chicago Tribune to come around town and interview us, business people, to get this list released, when I had fellow business people telling me that they asked 7 years ago and 2 years ago, and they went to the city manager, and the city manager got mad at them for asking questions and say, "Don't bother me." When I hear from my fellow business people saying the clique that is involved at City Center, Willis and his group run City Center, and the rest of us don't have any say. Whatever he says goes. And I don't think that's right. When you have $1 million budget of taxpayers' money being spent, our money, not your money, not Willis's money, the taxpayers' money, why there is not transparency there at City Center when you have a budget of $1 million going there of our money, why a list asked by merchants, taxpayers, the engine of the community, why we have to wait so long, why we have to have the media come to our town from Chicago to push this, to get this list brought out tonight. I think as a council and the new mayor, which I wish him well and all of you well, but democracy I don't see happening here. I see the media coming here, pushing the officials and pushing the clique at City Center to get the list produced after all these years. Why is this being pushed aside? There should be accountability here. In every branch of government, we have a democracy. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen in Elmhurst. It shouldn't happen anywhere. I'm very disappointed as a business member here. I'm second-generation business member here, 51 years in Elmhurst. I'm proud of my town. This is my hometown. And as a business owner and as a resident of Elmhurst, I'm very disappointed in our officials, especially officials of City Center. We're paying a lot of money. The city has deficits. The state has deficits. Our money should be looked after better. I'm very disappointed, and I hope our new mayor and our council will look into this and be accountable to us, because I don't want things to happen as usual in the past. Closed doors, not accountability here. We have a new council. We have a new mayor. All of us out here are taxpayers. All of you up there are accountable to us. And you're temporary public servants. Temporary. And if we don't see any changes here, if we have to bring the media here, if the Chicago Tribune has to be represented here tonight and make a story in the paper about our town, how does that look to our fellow citizens here in Elmhurst?
Thank you, Mr. Dulles. I gave you,
Okay.
you have an extra about 20 seconds, but we appreciate your
I
comments.
appreciate you letting me speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mrs. Fitzharris.
My name is Margie Fitzharris. I'm property owner and a merchant, Fitz's Pub. And I don't want to address Mr. Dulles personally, but I happen to be on the City Center board. But if I were nominated, I know that I could walk through City Center and get 16 merchants who would approve of me to be on the board signatures. Now, I may have a little more difficult time on the commercial property owners, and that would probably be those that property owners that don't want to be known. I don't know why, but I think I could get the 8 signatures. And one last point, I think with the list or without the list, I could do that. There are people who are on the board who have done that. It's not an impossible task. And I don't think, one last point on the list, that the list should just be handed out to anybody. And I'm not saying that they can't be handed to the alderman or any city government official. But one last point for my 3 minutes is Mr. Dulles, some of his comments seem to be confusing City Center with our City Council board. And I noticed that, and I wanted to make sure that I pointed it out, and hopefully everybody else had noticed that we were talking maybe both boards. I don't know. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the audience regarding City Center that would like to speak at this time, please raise your hand. Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public forum on this issue for City Center SSA 6 and SSA 7. Any other discussion amongst the aldermen? I think it is quick to note that there is a City Center directory, I believe, too, which lists all the merchants as well. And I'll get to Alderman Mullen here in a second. And as a property owner in a different town of a business, I can understand some of the property owners not wanting to have their name listed as a confidentiality issue as well. So looking at it from a constructive form, I can understand both sides to merchants or owners having that issue, mainly owners especially. And given the small number of names to get on the ballot, this looks like it's a pretty attainable task. Alderman Mulliner?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we clarify a couple of things here and make sure everybody truly understands what we're dealing with here. City Center seems to be more of a complex area than most areas because of a couple of things. One is we have a TIF district that's overriding the whole area. We have 2 SSAs, so there's a lot of complex things going on here. What we're discussing here are the 2 SSAs. The 2 SSAs are things that were brought to us by the merchants and the owners of the properties downtown in City Center. those are dollars that that group actually asked to tax themselves. Those aren't dollars that we're actually taking out of our general fund. There's no money coming from the city dollars to pay for any of that. That's money that's being separated out through an SSA, through 2 SSAs. We as a city truly have very limited control over that. We have the ability to say it's okay to go ahead and do it. We have the ability to ask the county to collect those dollars. We do not have the ability to control what the city center does. That's not our responsibility. Once they have those dollars, that's their responsibility. We have other SSAs in this town that are set up in a similar fashion, have a separate board of directors. They run with the money and they use the money as appropriate, and it's their job to monitor it. It's their job to make sure that it's monitored properly. If there's concerns about what's going on at City Center, the issue needs to be brought to City Center, and you need to make sure that the board of directors hears that loud and clear. We can help you. We can create that environment where we can provide you that access in this type of a forum, but we cannot interfere with the operation. That's not our job. City Center is an independent group. The TIF is a completely different thing. So we have to make sure we keep these things separated. So let's just make sure that we keep those things clear.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, and thank you, Alderman Mullner, for reminding us that this is about the appropriation and the pass-through. I feel it's a terrible shame that it took a city council discussion of appropriating City Center's own taxing money to ensure that the City Center board would operate within their bylaws. The bylaws that require an election process, the election process that specifically says that a nominating petition is only valid if it's signed by designated representatives of the merchants or by the property owners. And I appreciate that many of these owners may want to remain confidential. That's great. Then the bylaws need to be changed, because the bylaws require disclosure. And if this organization is going to operate within its bylaws, and its bylaws require that a person getting a petition signed gets petitions signed by designated representatives, then they have to know who the representatives are. When we run for public office, we're given a list of registered voters. Only registered voters can sign our petitions. So we go to a door, we can check if we want to. When we turn in our petitions, the county checks them to make sure they're signed by appropriate people. The same thing happens at City Center. So if City Center wants to operate lawfully within its bylaws, it has to produce these things. So while a member may want to remain confidential, the bylaws don't really allow for that. The bylaws require that anybody who wants to run for office and is eligible to do so may have access to that list. Anybody who wants to run for office and is eligible to do so is allowed to have the list. It's not a published marketing list. This is the official list of merchant members or business owners. So let's keep that in mind. So I'm really grateful that City Center has been able to juggle their very busy schedule to produce the list so that in this election cycle they can operate within their bylaws. I am an ex officio board member of City Center, and so I should have access to that list. Mr. Paravola has indicated that he will provide those lists to us, and so I'm very much looking forward to seeing them, and I very much appreciate the time and effort he's put into doing that. So we're talking about the appropriation, we're also talking about an oversight role that we should have to ensure that they're operating appropriately.
Thank you, Alderman Gutenkopf. I did obtain a actual copy of the bylaws from City Center to look this over. And there is nothing in the bylaws that says that they actually have to have a list. And what we do as elected officials, we go to the county, which is what people can do that own property, with the PIN numbers that City Center will provide and actually look up the data just like we would access to the Board of Elections. But just I wanted to clarify that because it's not in the bylaws that they actually have to have a list provided as clarification. Thank you.
But it does provide that a designated representative
Right.
of a merchant member, so if there's supposed to be a designated representative, there has to be a list of designated representatives somewhere. And City Center are the ones that do the checking on the petitions, so they need to have a list so they can check the signatures.
Sure.
So in order for somebody running for office to know who can sign it, they have to be able to get access to that list. So while the bylaws may not say, we will keep a list, the bylaws do say that they will check petitions to see who's eligible to sign them.
I just want to make a point of clarification, because that is not in the bylaws, per se, as you're explaining it, but just a point of clarification. Anybody with other discussion? Alderman Hipskin.
You know, you just made a point of clarification. I have a big point of clarification. It takes 8 signatures or 16 signatures?
8 if you're a property owner, and 16, I believe, if you're a merchant.
You know, fundamentally, I just don't understand why. I mean, if I need 8 signatures or 16 signatures and I wanted to be on this, I'd walk down the street and get 8 or 16 signatures. Why are we spending so much time on something that really doesn't, I really don't see the piece here. So if someone wants to clarify why we're spending a lot of time on something that 8 or 16 signatures, go out and get them. Next.
Right.
So if someone can clarify that for me, I'd love to hear it.
Alderman Nybo?
Well, there actually is potentially a very good question here, which is, we've got an entity that is publicly subsidized, and the question is whether a record of that entity is a public record. Is it a public record? Does the list of eligible voters constitute a public record that should be available to any member of the public? I don't know the answer to that question.
All right. Anyone else? Alderman Pezza.
I think the main point is TIF money is public money. And when we're dealing with distributing public funds, all parties should be held accountable, period. Whether it's easy to go get 8 signatures or if you had to get 108 signatures. Doesn't matter if you had to get 2 signatures. The point is, it's public money being distributed.
Point of order. This is SSA money.
But I'm talking about when
TIF
it comes
money.
to the TIF
Two
portion.
different.
Yeah.
It's
Two
still, we still subsidize. And if I'm subsidizing someone, I want to make sure that everything they're doing is accountable. And the other portion of their funding comes from the TIF, which we subsidize.
I think what
So it all
Hipskin-
ties together.
I think what Alderman Hipskin is pointing out is that this issue is SSA 6 and SSA 7, not TIF district.
But
We're
it
not talking-
ties in the end.
Right, but we're not talking about the TIF district. So
So-
that's what he's trying to clarify. And as the chair, I'd have to agree with him. So any other questions or discussion? All righty. Next on the agenda would be City Council Legal Matters, Orientation, our City Attorney, Storino. Storino. Sir, the public forum is ended. Thank you.
Mayor DeCiani, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to be with you and provide a workshop session for all of you and us. And let me introduce Kate Reichschneider, a lawyer in our office who has provided services already to the city. Actually had a pretty large role in the FOIA requests that have come through, and a number of the contracts, both public works and other contracts that we've worked on. The beginning, this is not intended, let me say what it's not intended to be. It's not intended to be a comprehensive analysis of the sections that we've chosen to highlight for you, but rather maybe pull out the ones that are most often asked and see if we can address some of the questions that you may have, and you can stop me at any time. The beginning slides, which we'll start with, are real fundamental, and I don't think that anyone will have very many questions, but we'll go through them rather quickly. Not much needs to be said about the composition of the Elmhurst City Council, and all of you, new and old, have all that information readily before you. The interesting thing about Elmhurst is it is a city manager form of government, and that is a strong manager form of government. It's unique in some instances in the state of Illinois, wherein department heads fall under the jurisdiction of the city manager. And as you can see, you've had that form of government for quite some time. Also, fortunately, Elmhurst is a home rule community. As most of you know, home rule communities are those communities that exceed a population of 25,000 or have passed their home rule designation by a referendum. Fortunately, Elmhurst is well beyond 25,000, and you have the benefits of being a home rule community. There's a great deal to be said about that. There's an excerpt out of the Illinois Constitution which provides what a home rule community can do, and basically a home rule community can do all things that are not preempted under the state statute. So when you look to the state statute to see whether or not Elmhurst can do it, the fact of the matter is they generally can do it unless the statute preempts them. What it really means is we set our rules, we set our ordinances, we set the laws that we want to be governed by. This is a series of pretty fundamental powers and duties of city officials. I think starting with the mayor. Mayor presides over city council meetings. He's a chief executive officer. He signs all resolutions and ordinances approved by you. He serves as a liquor commissioner, city clerk, provides her seal, attests to documents and contracts, ordinances. She is, in fact, the official custodian of all the records of the city, and she's obligated to keep a record of those licenses granted and revoked by the city. The aldermen are the legislative and policy members of the council. Approve budgets, consent to appointments of city officers. All of you are aware of that because we went through that process as the new council was sworn in and the mayor made his appointments to the city council, including the attorneys for that matter. City aldermen exercise control over the manager, the attorney, who are appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council. So all of this is very fundamental to all of you. City treasurer, likewise, custodian of all city funds, responsible for disbursement of city funds. Again, real fundamental. City manager, again, strong manager form of government. He's the chief administrative officer. Tom handles all day-to-day administrative functions of the city. He directly oversees, as I said before, police, fire, all city departments, public works, etc. He attends council meetings, obviously has no vote in policy making. Just this is a note, council rules of order, I mentioned this to Tom, that he can only participate in discussion with the consent of the council. I don't know if he was real happy about that, but he did point out to me that there's another section, which is also in our slide presentation, that indicates that he does have the right to participate. So as we're going to go through here, you'll see a few things that don't really line up perfectly, but that's not unusual in any village or city that in the 30-plus years I've been involved in. You go through your code, and you know, as we've done to do this workshop, and you find some things that are a little inconsistent, might be the best way to describe it. Of course, you all know about your committee forms, and we'll talk about this in a little more detail as we go forward, but those, for our purposes, are the committees, and as you went through your process a few weeks or a month plus ago, we appointed members to those committees. Yes. Thanks, Kate. There was a question that was asked of us, and I think it's been your policy, and it's the appropriate policy, and that is, under your committee form, are you subject to the Open Meetings Act? And basically, that's a resounding yes. And we have provided you with a memo. Oh, we're going to provide you with a memo, and you can have it before you leave. It simply provides the cases that indicate that you are, in fact, open to this Open Meeting Act. And what does that really mean? It means, and this is going to sound a little bit difficult, but it means that on a 3-member committee, that 2 aldermen speaking to each other about an agenda item on that committee would violate the Open Meetings Act. That is the technical reading of the statute, and there are cases that would probably support that. Not probably, there are cases that would support that, and Attorney General opinions. So council and committee members have to be careful about speaking to each other if you're on a 3-member committee, or even a 2-member committee for that matter, or 4-member committee, excuse me, because that's going to be a problem, because you're a majority of the quorum. Each alderman is a member of only one council committee, obviously. You're all aware of that. Council procedures. Of course, ask any questions. I had to bring that up at this point, I guess, but if you want to stop me, you have a question, please stop. We'll try to answer it as best we can. Elmhurst has a very detailed procedural scheme. And as I've been here for the last few months, you follow it pretty religiously, or at least you have while I've been here. And that's fine. The mayor is a presiding officer under your scheme, and under Robert's rules, he decides generally points of order. Here's that little inconsistency that we may or may want to fix sometime. Only members of the council may address the council except upon certain instances where the city clerk, city treasurer, and city attorney are recognized. Well, conspicuously absent is a city manager, which I don't really think is what we want, but you all are the policymakers. I would think you want the city manager to address you along with the attorney. We got into this the last council meeting. Motions to amend, main motions, taking precedence over pending motion. Amendment made is adopted, and a separate vote is required as to that amendment. Actually, we got into this at our last council meeting too, and that is a motion to substitute. You can't amend an amendment under your rules, and if you looked to do that, you could, interestingly, under Robert's rules, I believe, but you can't under your rules. So when you get to wanting to amend an amendment to a motion, you're really looking to substitute. That's our reading of your code. Mike, why don't you just...
So I guess that is, I think if I recall, we in the past, we have made motions to amend an amendment. So you're saying from what you've read that it should, instead of being a motion to amend an amendment, it should just be a substitute at that point?
Yes. Okay. You can, a motion is made, you can make an amendment. That's not a problem. But when somebody else says, you know, I want to amend that amendment, under your rules, that's a substitution. They want you to move, under this section of your code, it's a substitution.
Thank you. And if that was the case, City Attorney Strino, then they would have asked to a motion to substitute instead of...
Yes. I'm not, let me just say this, I'm not one that is bent on a lot of formality, as you can see, because sometimes I address you all by your first names, which I hope you're comfortable with, or if you're not, tell me. But just from that formality or informality standpoint, you have to set the guidelines of how you all want to handle these things. When in doubt, I'm going to follow the code kind of rigidly and very carefully. But you can set your own pattern, your own course of conduct, if you wish. And I'm not going to step in the way of you trying to accomplish something. And one of the examples of that would be your consent agenda process. I've been involved with that for a number of years in a number of communities, and I'm most comfortable with the way I've tried to direct you, and that is, if you're prepared to vote no, ask a question. I guess those are the two alternatives: vote no or ask a question on any item on the consent agenda. Just ask to have it removed, and there's no discussion, because then it falls to the next item on your agenda, and you can go about your business of, in a summary and expedited fashion, approving those items that nobody has a question on or nobody is prepared to vote no on. And I think that's just the easiest, most expedient way to accomplish what is a mechanism to move things along. Oh, I'm sorry, motion to reconsider. And most of you have seen this, and we have talked about it. We utilized it at the last council meeting. Anybody in the prevailing side or in the majority can move to reconsider, either at that council meeting or the next council meeting. You're also aware of this provision in your code that any alderman, any two aldermen, can remove something, have it deferred, and there's no debate. I think that is very unique to Elmhurst.
Can you go back to that one?
Sure.
I just want to make sure I read it clearly. So it is any two aldermen, not necessarily any two in that committee, but any two aldermen.
Any two aldermen present. That's word for word right out of the code. And Tom, you were aware of this provision, and I think other aldermen are also. Certainly the aldermen that have been on the council for a while.
Would that have to be voted on, City Manager Borchard? Would that, so if there's a motion to defer, there's no second and a vote, it's just...
It needs a second.
It needs a second.
Motion and a second.
Okay.
But then there's no debate.
No debate and no vote.
That's correct. They can just defer it.
Okay.
That's my reading of it.
City Manager Borchard.
I believe this is a bit unique and self-imposed by the Elmhurst City Council upon itself. Alderman Storino, I think, has properly reported on it. I just wish to highlight that it is not relating to any matter before the City Council. It relates to a council committee report.
It does say any report of council committee.
So this relates to those items that come out of a City Council committee report.
Alderman Morley?
I just heard two different things. I read it as a committee report can be deferred. Mr. Strino, did you say anything can be deferred?
No, the exact reading is any report of the council committee may be deferred. Maybe I spoke too quickly. If you weren't on that committee, you could still move to defer it.
And
an alderman not on that committee, to defer that committee report.
This supersedes Robert's rules?
Your rules would supersede Robert's rules.
But in the case of, let's say, something else we were voting on that was not a report, laying something on the table or delaying to date certain still applies.
That
and whether or not it's debatable or not is dependent on Robert's rules.
And I think you even are, under your rules, even cover that, and that's not meant to be confused with this provision.
Okay.
So to answer your second question, you're correct that you would lay it over in the more common way that Robert's rules, and you repeat Robert's rules, I believe, in your code. That provision of tabling and laying over. But in this unique situation of a report that's coming to the council, if two aldermen wanted to lay that over, they could do so with their a motion and a second.
Alderman Mulder.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because I'm looking at the ordinances at the same time. I mean, I understand that part clearly, but I want to make sure that the other part of the ordinance is also included. This may only be done once. So if we defer it, let's say Steve and I say we want to defer something, we send it back to committee. According to the ordinance I'm looking at, it says that can only be done once. So when it comes back the next time, it can't be deferred again?
That would be my understanding also, Mark, yes.
Another point of clarification, it doesn't necessarily have to go back to committee. It just gets deferred to the next meeting.
Right. That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
I agree, that's correct.
And if in fact you had a special council meeting shortly thereafter, that would be brought up immediately, correct?
It's to come back at the next regular meeting of the council. Okay. If you called a special meeting, I think arguably you could say it doesn't come up at that meeting, only at the next regular meeting.
Okay.
Okay. See, we've already dealt with a bunch of these things already, when the mayor votes, when he doesn't vote. The mayor votes in the case of a tie. He votes when 1/2 of the aldermen vote in favor of an ordinance. That came up last time. He votes when a greater majority is required, and in fact, we discussed that at the last council meeting also. But those are under your code and under the statute, which mimic each other, as I recall, when the mayor votes. And we'll talk a little bit about in the next, is it the very next slide? We'll talk about my opinion that I gave last time about when 7 can carry and when 7 can't. No, it's after this one, sorry. Okay. We've talked a great deal about when roll call votes are required and when they're not. And a roll call vote is required on all ordinances, all resolutions, all motions creating liability for the expenditure of funds. When a roll call vote is not required, adopt a council committee report. I don't know that that's been your practice. It doesn't have to be this way. You can certainly continue to call the roll if that's your comfort level. Nothing precludes you from doing that. You just simply aren't required to under the statute or under your code for that matter.
So only for ordinances do we actually have to do a roll call vote. If it's just strictly a report, we could do it by voice, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, very good.
Just to be clear, though, it's ordinances and or resolutions for expenditure of funds.
So, as it relates to a voice vote, is it up to the chair's discretion? Let's say we do a voice vote and there is obviously a nay or two. Is it required to go to a roll call, or is that the chair's discretion?
It's the chair. A voice vote is permissible on a roll call vote. It may be requested by any alderman. So if an alderman wants to have a roll call vote, I think this is clearly under your code, an alderman can call for it, and the chair should recognize that.
So, but to clarify, I'm talking about subsequent to the vote. After the vote is taken, after a voice vote has been taken, is an alderman in order to say, or is it the chair's discretion? Let's just say there's 14 of us and maybe 4 people said no, but you really don't know because it was a voice vote. Is it the chair's discretion at that point? Or would an alderman say, Mr. Chair, I'd like to have a roll call vote, or is that alderman, would you be out of line at that point?
I'm going to give you my sense of it. I think this provision is intending to be utilized when an alderman, before a vote is taken, is asking to have a roll call. But once a vote is taken, and by voice vote, if an alderman says, I'd really rather hear that, I'd rather have that clarified by a roll call, because I'm not clear on how many ayes and nays. I think that's the chair's prerogative then. This provision, I don't think, is intended to cover that. So the chair would, I mean, obviously, if you hear a number of nays, the prudent thing to do is to say, Clerk Spencer, please call the roll. This section of the statute is also repeated in your code. Your code section isn't identified here, but this indicates the quote-unquote rule of 7, if that's what you've been comfortable calling it in the past. It really comes down to any ordinances or resolutions that create any liability against the city for the expenditure appropriation of city money will require a concurrence of the majority of all the members holding office on the city council. So that means in Elmhurst 8. You need 8 votes.
I hate to go back to last week then, but I want to go back to last week.
That wasn't, this is my opinion,
Yeah.
Mark. It wasn't a ordinance. It didn't create a liability.
It did create a liability.
Well,
It could create a liability. Right, it could create a liability, okay. All right,
see,
forget it. Okay.
and the other thing is, there's a section in your, it's not repeated in here, but there's a section in that provision that frankly Alderman Morley pointed out to me that I looked at again today, and that is that when the action isn't dispositive, those are my words, when the action doesn't, Kate is helping me here. Yeah, it's on procedural matters, but if it's not going to be the final action on something, and in my view, that was not going to be the final action, because there is an ordinance that will be before you at the next city council meeting on that zoning matter, and that will clearly require 8 votes.
Would it be the city attorney's recommendation to clarify that portion of the municipal code? That one sentence that we're looking at where it says, or motion, because that's pretty broad.
And that's what you pointed out to me that night. I want to be clear and have belt and suspenders. And we could do that, but see, my opinion is in a situation where there's a report before you and it's 7 to 5, let's just use the perfect example last time, I was comfortable saying that matter passed because it wasn't an ordinance, it wasn't a motion, in my view, to expend or appropriate, and further, it wasn't dispositive. We're going to move along here a little bit. This is the Open Meetings Act. This is not meant, again, to be comprehensive. I probably provided you the most significant thing I wanted to address, and I'm going to give you a memo on that, and that is the obligation to comply with the Open Meetings Act in your committee, in your committees, and I think that's clear that you have to. This is all pretty self-explanatory. Here, we'll spend just a moment because this gets really complicated, to be blunt with you, and there's no clear guidance yet from any case law or even Attorney General opinion. This is the definition of a meeting. You have it in front of you. It's up on the screen. You can look at it. What comes up here and what is problematic for municipal lawyers is, what about email? And when can that rise to the level of an illegal communication under the statute? I'm not here to tell you that I have, or any municipal lawyer has all the answers. We're waiting for further guidance from case law and the Attorney General. But the prudent, and I think the better practice is
that if you're in a chat-type conversation with a majority of the quorum in Elmhurst, meaning 5, or if you're in a committee, that might be 2, but a majority of the quorum of being 5, you're going to have to be a little careful about your communications. There are some municipal lawyers that are cautioning people to be careful when they hit reply to all in a communication. I haven't gotten that far yet, but my colleagues are there. And but there's no case to tell you that when you hit reply to all, that you've now communicated and violated the Open Meeting Act. Some think we're getting there. We're coming close. That may be coming.
Alderman Pezza?
Regarding the Open Meetings Act, I was asked today, and I didn't know this answer, so it's perfect timing. Does it have to be posted someplace, or is that just a courtesy, or what's the rule regarding posting meetings?
It's coming. It's going to be.
Okay, good.
The exact answer to your question, Paul, is coming.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide or 2 slides.
Is a quorum of the city council 7 or 8?
8. I'm sorry. 8.
Okay.
Including or not including the mayor?
Well, that's my question.
Ask it.
Could we have a city council meeting with 7 aldermen and the mayor?
Yes. Here it comes.
I was like, I could just go to the next slide.
Most of the answers that Alderman Morley was just asking is there. The mayor can create the quorum. A majority of the quorum is 5 members. So when 5 of you are at an informal gathering, even an informal gathering, and the subject matter turns to Elmhurst business, if the 5 of you engage in a conversation about Elmhurst business at a local restaurant, you violated the Open Meetings Act technically. And this is the question that Alderman Pezza had. You must notice your meeting schedule. The answer is you do have to post for 48 hours in advance. You must post. It's very formal. When you reschedule a meeting, it's incredibly formal about how you go about doing it, how you reschedule that meeting. Public notice has to be given. The last one is rather complicated. I don't recommend you utilize it. Because it usually results in confusion. The best practice is if you want another meeting because you need a special meeting and it's 3 days from now, my advice to the city clerks is let's post the meeting, let's call the meeting, let's follow the statute. Let's not go through this 4th bullet point because usually it's just cumbersome and it creates for problems. And frankly, the public and the press struggle with it. So I'm just saying it's there, it's in the statute, you can avail yourself, but it's not my best practice.
For clarification of what is meant by posted, does that mean hanging a flyer here at City Hall, putting it on a website? What is sufficient to meet that definition?
It has to be posted in a convenient area to the public. City Hall, wherever you post it would be sufficient. I believe if you do post your notices on website, if somebody consistently maintains the website, you'd have to post notice on the website if it's something that's consistently maintained. If it's not, then there's an exception that applies that because it's just a website that kind of just has general information that you don't have to post. But if you do have somebody who's consistently maintaining that website, you have to post notice on the website.
So there's not a bare minimum requirement. If it's consistently posted to the website, it would need to be posted in the regular place, for example, here at City Hall, and the website?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Also a very oftentimes misunderstood part of the Open Meetings Act. It is permitted, as all of you know, and oftentimes the public doesn't know, it is permitted to have a closed session. That means where the council is permitted to go into a session just with itself, not with the public. You can also invite who you wish into that closed session, usually an attorney, the manager, but it doesn't even preclude you from inviting somebody else into closed session if you wish to have them in. These are the exceptions to the closed session, and this is not meant, again, to be comprehensive. These are just some that you are probably familiar with. You're going to see probably going forward that when we post in the future about executive sessions, for instance, the appointment or employment or compensation of an employee, discipline or performance, most communities put that under personnel. My best practice is that you would follow item 1 and make the call under either appointment, employment, discipline, performance, or dismissal of an employee. That, again, kind of my practice, what I'd like to see us do. You can see the other sections there. Mark?
My understanding is that in addition to what you have listed here, and maybe I'm just missing it because I'm reading it very quickly, security.
Oh, no.
Now,
that's in there too. This is, again, this is not meant to be all of them. There's probably, how many, Kate? There's maybe 14 of them.
Okay.
So it's, no, there's more.
Okay.
There's definitely more. And we've had FOIA issues come up on security already that Kate's had to deal with.
Okay.
The type wasn't this big, we put 4 in just
Okay.
so we could read the slide.
Thank you.
It's again, there's 14 of these exceptions, or don't quote me, maybe they're 13, but there's more than 4, I guarantee you that. No final action taken in closed session, you all know that. The other interesting thing that's come up that I don't know that you've done in Elmhurst, but you clearly can go into closed session in committee meetings, and we've done that. And we've worked on this a little bit. The public body may hold a closed meeting or closed portion of a meeting upon a majority vote of quorum present at an open meeting. So, you know, you have to open a meeting. You open the meeting, and then in the open session, you move to go to closed session. It's seconded, and you have to have a roll call vote to go into closed session. All of that is clear under the statute. You have to follow it. Pretty straightforward data here about minutes of meetings, requirement for verbatim meeting of minutes, recording of minutes in closed meetings. I don't want you to focus too much. Oh no, I'm sorry. The minutes of the open meeting available for public inspection. Audio and video recording must be destroyed in no less than 18 months, but that's only after the public body has approved the minutes of that closed session. You're required semi-annually to analyze your closed session minutes to determine whether or not they still ought to be held confidential. And frankly, Patty and I will be doing that relatively quickly.
In regards to minutes of a meeting, and there's been discussions in that in the past, is there any definition or clarification of how comprehensive of the discussion the meeting minutes should reflect?
Good question, and the answer is yes. The statute really provides only for a topic type keeping of minutes in executive session. I'm not sure I use the exact word topic, but categories. There is no requirement in the statute to keep detailed minutes of Alderman Bram said, Alderman Shea said. That's not required at all. It's more a discussion ensued regarding, and you say that in a topical way, because there is a verbatim recording of those minutes that is being kept. So if for any reason someone needed to listen to those minutes, meaning a member, the council's free to listen to them, the attorney is, the manager is, you can hear them. So you can listen to them. So there's you'll find most minutes are more topical following the statute. You can certainly make them more detailed if you wish to.
Now, my question was in regards to open session, not closed session.
Oh, I apologize.
And it sounded like you were referencing closed session. So is the same statements holding true for open session as well? Because there is no other record other than the meeting minutes, even though we at Elmhurst videotape it, but there is no record of what is discussed.
Thank you. I was in fact referring to the executive session minutes, but with respect to open session minutes, more detail is generally put in those minutes. Not less topical, more detail.
But there's no statute or anything that
there's not.
Directs that?
There isn't.
Thank you.
I have information.
I was jumping ahead when I was thinking about the Freedom of Information Act and public records and the accessibility of these. And I think the one thing to focus on that you should all know, if you don't already, is that your emails are in fact subject to the Illinois Freedom of Information Act. There are exceptions to the disclosure or the exemptions that are available under the Freedom of Information Act. They include, and again, not comprehensive, but just meant to be a highlight of a few, violate personal privacy, documents that aren't in a final form that are really just being drafted, and there are a series of other exemptions that are available under the Illinois Freedom of Information Act. And the procedure is, here's where I was jumping ahead. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this because there's a bill on the governor's desk to basically change all of this. And it's going to be much more burdensome on the community, much more burdensome on the clerk and the attorney, less burdensome on the mayor, as a matter of fact, because he's no longer going to be the judge of an exemption that has been utilized by the city, because there's going to be created a new what are they calling the public access counselor at the Attorney General's office. So if we deny, after this bill is signed into law, if we deny a request, by the way, that's going to be 5 working days, not 7, as the law currently is. So it means we're going to have to work faster. In the current procedure and process, which is reflected here, you would be, we deny a request, we assert an exemption, they have an appeal right to the mayor. Now, under the new statute, and we'll put it up here in a second, these are some of the exemptions that are going to remain under the new act. But here are the amendments. And you can see that we're going to have to move quickly because we're going to have only 5 business days. An appeal will no longer be made to the mayor. It'll be made to this Attorney General's office public access counselor. And the most interesting, and the Illinois Municipal League objected significantly to this. They objected to all these amendments, to be honest, but if you don't meet the 7 days, or excuse me, the 5 days, it's presumed that the information is available. So that's problematic. It means if we have a viable exemption, we have to assert it in 5 days, or we're going to be obligated to produce the data, even though it would be exempt. I think there are 2 other sections that I'm going to go through rather quickly, but at least I guess what I'm asking you to be aware of are, and if you have further questions, please, I'm the person to talk to or somebody in my office, but there are both conflicts of interest and gift ban requirements on the part of all of you. And this is meant to do nothing more than to let you know you must be cautious with respect to the state statute. There's 2 or 3 statutes that deal with conflicts of interest, and then there is the state gift ban. And these are exceptions to the interest in contract. Very technical, as you can see. You have it with you, you can bring it home, you can look at it, but they're very technical exceptions to the conflict of interest statute. The ethics statute is mandated by the state. We in Elmhurst, like all the other communities, passed our own state gift ban and ethics code. Here are some examples of exceptions. General rule, as in all of these things, is you can't take any gratuity, loan, cash, or anything from anybody who is a prohibited source. But then, in the wisdom of the legislature, we have all kinds of very complicated exceptions.
Quick question regarding the conflicts of interest. Don't we have to file with the county? It just dawned on me, and I've never been given one. When will we receive that form, and when do we file it? The Statement of Economic Interest?
Yes, it's due May 1 of every year. I'm doing that from memory, but I think I'm right about that.
Okay, so if we ran for office and filed, that counts? Not after we're elected, we don't have to refile or anything?
No, you refile.
Oh, you're kidding. I never received another one.
You file when you run, and my recollection is you file again when before the 1st. But, you know, I'm happy to look at that.
So,
Bid another one? Okay.
The year you run, you don't have to do it again. Next year
I'll defer to Mark. Is that?
the year you run, you do not have to file again. The following year, you're going to have to file.
No, that's not true.
I've received one.
So there's been, even at the county, because I actually asked this question at the county, and there's conflicting opinions at the county if you need to or not, depending on who you speak with at the county. Some say you do after you win the election, because before you win, you're just a candidate, and after, then you need to follow up. And some have said you do not.
I will answer this for you. My opinion was what I first said to you, that you file when you run, you file it with your nominating petitions and with your papers, and then when you're elected, you file again. That's the practice that I've kind of advised, not kind of, that's what I've advised when people ask, but it's easy to get a definitive answer, and I will get one.
Okay, thank you.
I'll also add to that our county clerk, Gary King, is very much on top of who's required to file these statements and has always, at least with respect to me, been very prompt in getting me the forms that need to be filed with the county. So
Sends a list, I believe.
I think I figured it out. It's because you file when you run. If you're elected, you're not sworn in until after the filing date, so you'll file again the next year.
Okay.
So if they're due May 1st, we're not sworn in until after May 1st, which is why you don't file twice.
I think you're right. I think because you are sworn in after May 1st, and the question asks the prior year, so you had no prior year, and so you would not have had to file, unless you were someone who was a holdover and had run and was reelected, if that made any sense, and you can follow what I'm saying. As I understand, in the example of Alderman Pezza, she would have not had to do it, but I'll check on that.
Thank you.
Alderman Mulliner?
I just want to I have one question. This goes back a little ways for a minute. Just want to make sure that we're all clear on this. If the mayor is not present, we have to appoint a mayor pro tem. What's the voting rules for the mayor pro tem? And how do we select that mayor pro tem?
It needs a motion. Let me ask this fundamental question that I think I know. There is no deputy mayor in the city of Elmhurst. Okay. Is there a provision in our code for a deputy mayor? I don't recall seeing one. Okay. Then a motion and a second for a president pro tem. Now, I'm not looking at your code, but I'm going to tell you my opinion, and I'll stand corrected after I look at your code on this specific issue. I take it this is coming up, so I better look. It will not require, if you do, it'll require a majority of the quorum present. It won't, in my view right now, unless your code says something to the contrary, it will not take 8. So if I have to change that opinion, I will when it comes up, but right now, that's my view of the way your code would work, assuming there's not something inconsistent in your code. And that unless you have other questions, that concludes our presentation.
Pardon me, I have one
Diane.
more. This concerns the mayor pro tem issue. So we voted and selected a mayor pro tem. Does that person then vote with their aldermanic seat or vote only as the tiebreaker as the mayor would?
That person, President pro tem, votes in his aldermanic capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Attorney Storino. It was a great, fine presentation. At this point, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn into a special closed session. Alderman Morley? Or to closed session, or to committee, I'm sorry. Into committee, I stand corrected. Asking for a motion to break into committees. Alderman Morley, Alderman Gutenkopf, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned.